Hi and welcome to my Toothless Costume video. The first thing I did was make a jumpsuit. The only change I made was putting a zip at the front because I was making it for a little boy. I'll put the link to the pattern I used in the description box. It was pretty straightforward. I just used some stretchy black fabric that I had in the cupboard and put it together exactly as the directions said to, except for the zip. These pattern pieces were from a previous plushie that I'd made out of the Toothless. I just scaled this size up to I think 170%. I used a upholstery foam square that was about 10 centimeters thick. So once I'd traced the pattern onto it and cut the fin out, I went and cut it in half thickness wise. I marked which way was face up just to ensure that the smooth face of the foam was facing upwards, and then I did the same thing for all the fins with some scuba fabric. I obviously did one red and the rest were black. Then I went through and overlocked everything together, mind the cat, and then I put the foam bits on the inside, sewed up the raw edge, and then I went through with my regular machine and did some detailing. The tail started off at 170% as well, but it was too heavy, so once I'd done all this I went back and cut it down smaller again. Once it was the right size, I'd sewed the fins onto the inside of the fabric and then stuffed it full of stuffing until it was the right size. Once it was all stuffed, I sewed up the end, but before I sewed it completely up, I attached some Velcro and some elastic. And here we have the red fin detailing. I just attached some elastic to some brown felt that I had, made 2 loops, and then I used some more Velcro to attach the fin to the tail. It had to be operational according to my son. Once the red fin was attached, I used this template that I had for the skull. I just traced it over onto the tail and then painted it on with some white acrylic paint. Once I'd overlocked the wings together, I just used some batting as the base for the wing and cut 2 out. I used the foam strips that I had left over from another project to make the detailing. You'll notice that I put them straight down, but I actually went back and changed it because it was completely wrong, but I still used the same process. Just trimmed and hot glued it together. And then once they were all glued, I wedged them inside the fabric and then overlocked the fabric together. And then I went and used my regular machine and sewed down either side of the foam to make it look more pronounced. And then I went through and I hot glued some elastic loops, one at the shoulders, one at the elbow, and one at the finger of each wing. I also added 2 Velcro loops for the chest. For the headpiece, I had another upholstery foam square that was too thick, so I just measured 2.5 centimeters, 1 inch, trimmed it off, and used a pattern that I had to hot glue it onto a form. I used an old t-shirt with a hole cut in as a kind of balaclava, I guess, to hold the head on, and then so it was wearable without the foam being on the inside. Once I was happy with the shape of the face, I went back and used some of this wadding to smooth out the foam joins. I just went around and hot glued and trimmed as I went, making it smooth as possible. I used a low temperature hot glue gun for this part just to make sure it didn't melt the wadding. This bottom jaw didn't make it into the final costume. I couldn't get the shape right, so I left it out, but here's proof that I did do it. I decided against sewing the pattern pieces onto the face. I just used my low temperature hot glue gun again to follow the curves of the mask and make it as seamless as possible. I just did tiny bit by tiny bit, making sure there was no creases in the fabric. The only bit I did stitch was this top V-shaped piece and around the ears, just to make sure that it was going to hold up to Halloween jumping and being pulled around. But you could probably hot glue it. Once the head was all hot glued and stitched together, I went and hot glued some sequins on just to make it more scaly looking. For the eyes, I found a picture in a book and I just drew the size that I needed, and I got some of this see-through mesh from my local Spotlight and then just transferred that onto this and painted it with these acrylic paints. Once both eyes were painted, I hot glued them onto some white EVA foam and then just added strips of black around so it was the same thickness as the mask. Once I was happy with them in the mask, I went back and just trimmed the black foam to follow the same contours as the shape of the face, and then I hot glued them in. For the feet, I just used the same pattern piece scaled up to the right shoe size. I cut out 2 bottom pieces and 4 boot pieces, sewed them all together and then stuffed them full of stuffing again. Once I was happy with the fit, I just added some elastic around the top part so they wouldn't fall down. And here we have the finished costume. I had about 18 hours of video. I'm not sure how long it actually took me. I stopped counting after a while, but he was happy with it. Thanks for watching my toothless video.